Sup guys, it's Alex here and welcome to another edition of the Bracketology update. This one is for January 14th, 2020 as you can see up there, and what we have today is the results the fallout from this past weekend where there was a lot of crazy games, especially in the Big Ten. Michigan State got absolutely hammered by Purdue. Then Michigan also lost to Minnesota. Penn State ended up losing. I can't remember. I don't even remember who Penn State lost to. Ohio State lost their fourth game in a row. And then even Virginia lost to Syracuse, and there will be more on that later. But yeah, this was just a crazy weekend. Baylor ended up beating Kansas too. That was pretty significant. As you can see down there in the South Regional, Baylor is now a 1 seed. But I'm just going to go region by region here, just kind of give you guys some updates on the movement and new to the fields in the bracket. So up here in the West Regional, Marquette is now down to an 8. I think they lost to Providence over the course of the past week. I don't remember if it was on Saturday or during the week. Illinois is new to the field after beating Rutgers, and they've actually been really impressive this season. I've actually kind of liked them. I think they're now ranked number 24 for the first time since like 2015. Colorado is up to number 5 after destroying, I want to say it was Oregon State over the course of the weekend, but I may be wrong on that, so don't quote me. Then New Mexico State is now up to a 12. Creighton is now up to a 6. They've been pretty impressive too. They just cracked the top 25. Northern Iowa is up to an 11. Winthrop's up to a 14. Penn State, as I mentioned earlier, they lost and are now down to a 7 seed. Same with St. Mary's. I think they ended up losing 2. Don't remember who it was 2, but they are now down to a 10. South Dakota State is new to the field as a 15 seed. Then over here in the East Regional, in the top right corner of the bracket, we have LSU up to an 8 seed. Houston down to a 9. Villanova down to a 5. Maryland down to a 4. Michigan down to a 6. Oklahoma down to an 11. A lot of down movements in this bracket. Dayton up to a 3. Now, Obi Toppin did get injured over the course of the weekend, but I don't think he's going to be out for too long. I mean, ESPN and like all the different sources I've been checking haven't sounded too worried about it, so I wouldn't be too concerned. But they are now up to a 3 seed. Montana is now up to a 14 seed. Then Florida is down to a 10 after getting hammered by Missouri, who had lost to Charleston Southern a couple of weeks ago. So Florida's just not looking good at this point. Then Charlotte is new to the field as a 15 seed. Then if we scroll down to the Midwest Regional in Indianapolis, which I may be going to, don't know if it'll be Sweet 16 or Elite 8. We'll just kind of see how it goes. With my work schedule, I don't know if I'll be able to get off for the weekday games. I think it's Thursday and Saturday. But anyway, Indiana is now up to an 8 seed. Ohio State, as I mentioned earlier, has lost 4 in a row, so now they are down to a 5 seed. Virginia is now in a playing game after losing to Syracuse. The defending national champions might not even make the tournament. They're in the last 4 in, which is just crazy to think about. They have not been looking good at all. Kentucky is now up to a 4 seed after they rise from a 6 to a 4. Stony Brook up to a 13. VCU and Xavier is the other playing game. They're both in the Midwest Regional. Then Michigan State is now down to a 3 after getting hammered by Purdue. Western Carolina is new to the field as a 14. Memphis is down to a 7 after needing that comeback victory against South Florida. And then Purdue is up to a 10, and Kansas is down to a 2 after losing to Baylor, which is a nice segue into this bottom right regional of the South. Baylor is now up to a 1. Stanford is now up to an 8. They've actually been pretty impressive. I think their only losses this season are to Kansas and Butler, so that's actually a pretty impressive resume. And we got Seton Hall as a 4. They haven't lost since December 14th. Colgate up to a 13. Arizona down to a 6. I think they did lose to Oregon State over the course of the weekend. Maybe it was Sunday night. Georgia State is new to the field as a 14. Iowa is up to a 7. And then Texas Tech is down to a 10, and then Nichols is new to the field as a 15. So it's a quick update on the bubble. The last 4 byes are St. Mary's, Purdue, Florida, and Oklahoma. Florida was a projected number 1 seed in the preseason, and I was right about them. I was like, there's no way I thought they'd make the tournament, but I was like, there's no way they deserve to be a 1 seed. They'll probably end up being like a 4 or a 5, but now they might not even make the tournament. They're now on the bubble. And we got Xavier, VCU, Virginia, and Georgetown as the last 4 in. First 4 out are Virginia Tech, NC State, Washington, and USC. Then the next 4 out are Tennessee, St. John's, DePaul, and Minnesota. So now, as you guys know, every bracketology that I now do in Microsoft Excel with being able to do the interactions with picking the different winners in the bracket and moving them on throughout the course of the bracket. Brackify got shut down, so I'm still on the lookout for that, but I've started working at my new job, so my time's kind of limited. But if you guys find something that's similar to Brackify, let me know in the comments section. Give me a link, and maybe I'll be incorporating that into my future bracketologies. Make it look more visually appealing for you guys. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into this top left regional. Obviously, we're going to have Gonzaga beat Quinnipiac. That one's pretty obvious. Then I think that Marquette with Marcus Howard, they'll be able to beat Illinois, though I do like Illinois this season. New Mexico State, I'm going to have my first upset here and pick them to beat Colorado. Louisville, I think, will beat Wright State, and I think New Mexico State is always one of those teams that can pick or that can upset any team. Colorado is looking like a world beater when they beat Oregon, but then they followed that up with a loss. I can't remember who it was to. The next week it may have been Oregon State. And I think that Creighton will beat Northern Iowa. Wouldn't be too concerned about that one. Then we got Oregon beating Winthrop. And then we have Penn State and St. Mary's, kind of two teams that are heading south right now. But I think that Penn State would be able to get the victory in that matchup there. And we got San Diego State beating South Dakota State. And what I'm going to do now from now on is, since I'm doing it in Excel, it's just easier for me to navigate. I'm going to go ahead and go region by region and make my picks through the Final Four, so that way it's visually more easier for you guys to follow, so that way you're not going all the way across the bracket, and it's just easier for me not having to click through everything. So then we have Gonzaga and Marquette. As much as I'd love to pick Marquette moving on here, I got to go with Gonzaga. They are now the number 2 team, or I think they're still number 1. They're up by like 7 points in the AP poll over Baylor. I think Baylor should be number 1, but Gonzaga is still a really good team. Then I think that Louisville will beat New Mexico State. Then we got Oregon with Peyton Pritchard beating Creighton. Then I think that San Diego State will beat Penn State, which sets up the Sweet 16 matchup between Gonzaga and Louisville. I think that Gonzaga would be able to move on to the Elite 8 there and beat the Louisville Cardinals. Louisville was number 1 at one point, but I don't really know what to think of them right now. They're beating teams that they should beat and then losing to teams that are kind of like 50-50 and better than them. So I just don't really know what to think of them at this point. Then I'm actually going to go with Oregon beating San Diego State. I know San Diego State is one of 2 teams in the nation that haven't lost. I think they're 17-0, but they haven't really played the competition level that Oregon has, and Oregon just had that game of the year so far against Arizona, and I think Oregon would win that matchup there. And I also think that Oregon will beat Gonzaga and move on to the Final Four right there. I really like Peyton Pritchard this season. Right now he's one of the leading candidates for the Wooden Award, and I think that Oregon will be able to pull off the somewhat upset there and move on to the Final Four as a 3 seed. So then we are going to go down to the bottom left regional here. We are going to go with Butler beating the winner of Grambling and UC Riverside, which, I mean, that doesn't matter because they're both going to lose to Butler either way. And I think that Indiana, they're kind of a surprise team this year. I didn't expect them to make the tournament after not making it last year with Romeo Langford. I don't know any individual players on their team, but I mean, they've been getting some quality wins over the past couple of weeks. I think they beat Ohio State this past weekend. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what happened and what made them move up to an 8 seed. Then we got Ohio State beating the winner of Virginia and Georgetown. I realize I just spelled Georgetown wrong, so I apologize for that. But honestly, I think that Georgetown with Mac McClung would end up winning that game. But then I think that Ohio State would beat them. That's probably the best case scenario for Ohio State, because otherwise I probably would have picked them getting upset by a 12 seed. Then Kentucky will beat Stony Brook. Arkansas, I think, would beat the winner of VCU and Xavier, which I think would be Xavier. Then we got Michigan State beating Western Carolina. Purdue, I think, would actually pull off the 10/7 here against Memphis, not Michigan State. Then we got Kansas beating Murray State. Murray State does not have John Morant, but I think they'll still be able to win their Ohio Valley Conference, and I think they'll be able to beat Belmont there. And then so for a spot in the Sweet 16, Butler and Indiana, battle of the 2 in-state rivals here. I'm going to go with Butler. They've just obviously been a more impressive team this year and have a number 1 seed for a reason. I just don't know too much about Indiana as well. And then Kentucky and Ohio State played earlier. I think they played about a month ago. Ohio State did end up winning that game, but these 2 teams have been trending in complete opposite directions ever since that game. Kentucky has not lost, and Ohio State has lost 4 times. So I got to go with Kentucky pulling off the victory there. Arkansas and Michigan State, I think this one could be a potential upset with Arkansas over Michigan State. Arkansas has been pretty impressive, but I got to go with the talent of Michigan State with Cassius Winston. Then Purdue and Kansas, I'm going to go with Kansas. I want to say these 2 teams faced off this season. I think they faced off recently. I just don't remember if it was this season or something in the past, but I think that Kansas would end up winning that one. They're just a more talented team. So then Butler and Kentucky, I'm actually going to go with Kentucky here, moving on as the 4 seed over the 1. They're just more talented. Butler does have an impressive resume so far, but Kentucky, I think, would be able to get it going by the end of the season and move on to the Elite 8. And they would face Michigan State. I think that Michigan State could beat Kansas there with Cassius Winston. But then for a spot in the Final Four, as much as I want to pick Kentucky moving on there, I think Michigan State's going to get everything figured out, which I know is a pretty bold prediction considering they just lost by 29 to put them in the Final Four. But I think that they'll be able to get the victory there against Kentucky and move on to face Oregon. So that's crazy, having putting them as a 3 seed in the Final Four after getting blown out by Purdue. But this is Bracketology, NCAA tournament. Anything can happen. That's why everybody loves it. So now I'm going to go to the bottom right regional here. Baylor and Princeton. I'm going to go with Baylor winning that one. I mean, that one's pretty obvious. And then Stanford and Rutgers. I'm going to go with Stanford, though Rutgers has been pretty impressive this season. I'll give them credit for that. Wichita State and Duquesne. I know last time I said Duquesne or whatever, but I've researched it. I got a couple of people in the comment section saying, hey, I love hearing like the A10 people or non-A10 people try to pronounce that name, but I know it is Duquesne now. But either way, I still have them losing to Wichita State, who had a pretty impressive win against Connecticut this past weekend. And I think that Seton Hall with Miles Powell will beat Colgate. Then I'm going to go with an upset here. I'm going to go with Liberty, the 11 seed over the 6. If you guys have been following me over the course of the season, you know that I really love Liberty as a mid-major team here. I think they get the victory over a reeling Arizona team. I don't really know what to think of Arizona this season, so I really like Liberty in that one. Florida State, I think, would beat Georgia State. Iowa, I think with gosh, I can't remember what his name is. I think like Alex Garza. I think there's somebody else too that's really good, but I think they get the victory there over the. Texas Tech made it to the national championship game last year. I just don't know what that would be called. I guess national championship player. I don't know what that's called. Then Auburn, I think, would beat Nichols. Then for a spot in the Sweet 16, we got Baylor and Stanford. This is a pretty big game if you're a women's college basketball fan, but they are facing off in men's college basketball, and I got Baylor winning that one. Wichita State and Seton Hall, I got to go with Miles Powell and Seton Hall. I mean, they haven't lost in over a month, but I mean, Wichita State hasn't either. I think their only loss was to West Virginia, but don't quote me on that. I think that Seton Hall is a more impressive team and well-rounded, and they got the superstar power in Miles Powell. Then Florida State, I think, would beat Liberty, as much as I want to pick Liberty moving on. Then Iowa, I think, would lose to Auburn. Baylor, I think, would beat Seton Hall. Baylor has shown their depth over the course of the most recent wins on the road against Texas Tech and Kansas. I think they get the victory there. Auburn, I think, would then beat Florida State. Auburn is the other team that has not lost this season. I think they get the victory there, but then I think they lose their first game. I'm assuming that, or for the purposes of this, I'm assuming they go undefeated throughout the course of the tournament, and they lose for the first time to Baylor, who's going to move on to the Final Four as a 1 seed. So far we have 3 out of 3 teams in the tournament are green teams. We got Oregon, Michigan State, and Baylor, which is just kind of silly, but I thought it'd be pretty cool. Duke, I think, would beat the winner of Norfolk State and Robert Morris. That one doesn't require too much analysis. LSU, I think, would beat Houston. Villanova, I think, would beat Akron. I mean, I don't know too much about Akron there, but I think Villanova could get the job done. Maryland would beat William & Mary. William & Mary is actually kind of a sneaky team if you're looking for a 13/4 upset there, but I think Maryland has the star power with Anthony Cohen to be able to overcome that. And then Michigan, I think, would beat Oklahoma. I just don't really know what to think about Oklahoma. This happens every year. I just can't get a good grip on them. Dayton, I think, would beat Montana. Then we got Florida, I think, would pull off the 10/7 against Wisconsin. And then West Virginia would beat Charlotte. Then for a spot in the Sweet 16, we got Duke beating LSU. Maryland overcoming Villanova. That one, I think, would be a pretty good game to see, but I think Maryland would get the job done there. Dayton, I think, would get the victory over Michigan. And then we have, I'm actually going to go with the 10/2 here, having West Virginia lose as the 2 seed to the 10 seed. I know I've been trashing Florida this season, but I think West Virginia's been too much of a surprise this season. I think they lose their to the 10 seed Florida Gators, who have Kerry Blackshear and a good amalgamation of talent, but then they just need to figure out what they got to do to be able to be a better team at this point. Duke, I think, would beat Maryland. Then I'm going to go with Obi Toppin and Dayton beating Florida. Then as much as I want to pick Dayton moving on to the Final Four here, Duke's talent is just going to overwhelm them, and I'm sure Mike Krzyzewski is going to focus on shutting down Obi Toppin. That means Duke is going to move on to the Final Four, which sets up the championship game over here, Oregon and Michigan State. I'm actually going to go with Oregon pulling off the victory against Michigan State. Peyton Pritchard leading them to the national championship game. And Duke, I think, with their overwhelming talent, I think would beat Baylor. It's a battle of the 2 and 3 teams in the AP poll right now, which sets up Oregon and Duke. I think I had this championship game in my last bracketology too, but right now I'm going to go with Duke. With Vernon Carey, their only loss this season was that crazy game to Stephen F. Austin. I think they get the victory here and become the national champions. So, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I know this was a pretty long video. My bracketologies are starting to get a little bit longer, but I can cut it down if you want. I've just been trying to provide some more analysis and stuff for you guys. Now, let me know what you guys thought of my predictions. Let me know what you think of the bracketology. Let me know your own predictions in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and then I'll have more information on the NCAA tournament ticket giveaway coming up in the beginning of February, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you all later.